My knuckles were white against the steel parallel bars, 3 months post-surgery, and every step still felt like walking on broken glass. I was focused on my breathing, trying to force my left leg to cooperate when the double door swung open. It was Jason, but he wasn't alone. Tiffany, my so-called best friend, was hanging off his arm like a cheap accessory. He didn't ask how I was, he didn't offer a hand. He just tossed a thick manila envelope onto the gym floor exactly 3 FT out of my reach. "Sign it," he said, his voice dripping with boredom. Tiffany checked her reflection in the gym mirror and smirked. "It is just business, Mandy. You are dead weight. Wow, serving papers to your wife while she is relearning to walk. That is a new level of low. Drop a comment and let me know what is the most heartless breakup story you have ever heard. I want to see if anything can top Jason." Most women would have screamed. They would have thrown themselves at his feet or clawed at Tiffany's face. That is exactly what they wanted. Narcissists feed on reaction. They need your tears to validate their power. So I gave them the only thing that actually hurts a monster. I gave them nothing. Psychologists call it the grey rock method. You make yourself as uninteresting, unresponsive, and flat as a stone. I stared right through Jason's forehead, my face a perfect empty mask. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just leaned down, struggling against the pain in my hips, grabbed the envelope with my reach a tool and put it in my bag. Then I turned my back to them and took another step on the bars. The silence in the room was suffocating. They waited for the explosion. And when it didn't come, the air went out of the room. "Let's go," Tiffany muttered, looking annoyed that she didn't get her show. As soon as the heavy door clicked shut, the performance ended. I didn't collapse, I didn't cry. I sat down on the bench, opened my gym bag and pulled out my laptop. My hands weren't shaking. They were steady. I dialed a number I had saved for this exact moment. Eric picked up on the first ring. Eric was Tiffany's husband, and unlike Jason, he wasn't a fool. "Initiate protocol, Ghost," I said. My voice was calm, factual, lethal. "Jason thinks he just divorced a burden. Let's show him what happens when the bank vault closes." Eric didn't ask for details. He knew we had been preparing for this possibility for 6 months. I logged into the secure server. On the screen, the transfers to our joint account glowed in green. $12,000 a month. That was the allowance I gave Jason to make him feel like a man disguised as his sales commissions. I clicked the mouse once. Cancel. Then I moved to the credit cards. Cancel, cancel. Jason thought I was just typing in a diary. He used to laugh at me, saying I was playing with my little stories in the sewing room. He had no idea that those stories were ghostwritten autobiographies for Fortune 500 CEOs, and my hourly rate was higher than his monthly salary. He thought he was cutting off a leech. He had just fired his financier. I watched the confirmation bars load. Access denied. Account frozen. Asset transfer complete. It wasn't revenge yet, it was just aggressive accounting. To Jason, the room at the end of the hall was just the sewing room. He called it my little cave, a place where his unemployed wife went to tinker with hobbies while he went out into the real world to hunt for our survival. He never wondered why the door was solid oak or why I had installed a keypad lock. If he had ever bothered to look closely at the tax returns I asked him to sign without reading, he might have noticed the discrepancies. But Jason was a man who loved the sound of his own voice too much to read the fine print. Inside that room there was no sewing machine. There were 3 monitors, a secure server, and a wall of framed non-disclosure agreements. I wasn't unemployed. I was a ghost. For the last decade, I had been the voice behind 3 New York Times best-selling business memoirs. When a tech CEO needed to sound human or a politician needed to sound profound, they called me. My retainer fee alone was $20,000 a month. Last year, my total income was $850,000. I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen, the one titled Jason's Support. It was a masterclass in creative accounting. I had spent 10 years curating his ego like it was a fragile museum exhibit. When we first got married, Jason brought $40,000 of credit card debt into the relationship. He told me it was an investment in his image. I didn't scream, I just paid it off quietly and told him I had found a coupon strategy for groceries when he wanted the luxury sedan, the one he was currently driving Tiffany around, and his credit score was too low to qualify. So I leased it through my shell corporation and told him the dealership had made a special exception because of his charisma. I had built a world where he was the king, paving the road with my own money so he would never feel a bump. I bought the Italian suits he wore to client dinners. I paid for the vacations, where he took credit for the itinerary. I even funded the performance bonuses he thought he was earning at work. Yes, every time he came home bragging about a commission check, it was often money I had funneled into his account to keep him from feeling inadequate when his actual sales numbers slumped. I sat back in my chair, the the hum of the server acting as white noise. I realized then that I hadn't just been a wife. I had been a venture capitalist investing in a failing startup. I kept pouring capital into Jason, hopping for a return on investment, affection, loyalty, partnership, but the market had crashed. He wasn't a partner, he was a liability. And in business, when an asset becomes toxic, you don't hold on to it out of sentiment, you liquidate it. I opened the file for the luxury sedan lease. It was time to call in the repo team. He wanted to live the high life with Tiffany. Let's see how they enjoy the view from the bottom. 3 days after I stopped the money, Jason and Tiffany decided to physically invade the sanctuary. I was still at the rehab center during the day, grueling through physical therapy sessions to get my mobility back, but my home security cameras sent the notifications directly to my phone. I watched the live feed from my hospital bed. They walked in like they owned the place. Tiffany was already redecorating in her mind, pointing at my vintage armchair and wrinkling her nose. I heard Jason's voice through the app. We need to clear this junk out. Tiffany needs a space for her yoga studio. They were standing outside my office door. My stomach tightened, but not out of fear, out of disgust. He was trying to pry the keypad off with a screwdriver. When that didn't work, he kicked the door. It didn't budge. He had no idea he was trying to break into a room that held millions of dollars in intellectual property. Then the camera angle switched to the living room. My daughter Kayla was sitting on the couch, her headphones on, trying to block them out. Tiffany walked over. Phone in hand, camera already recording. "Hey, sweetie," Tiffany chirped, her voice pitching up an octave for her followers. "Look who's here, we're going to be such a fun family." She tried to wrap an arm around Kayla's shoulders. Kayla flinched and pulled away, sliding to the far end of the couch. "Ah, don't be shy," Tiffany laughed, still recording. "We're going to have a girls' day soon. Shopping on me." I watched Tiffany check the engagement on her post. Immediately after, she didn't care about Kayla's discomfort. She cared about the aesthetic of being a stepmom. It was the parasocial substitute. She wanted the likes, the comments, calling her a saint for taking on a teenager, the social currency of motherhood without the sweat equity. I had spent 16 years wiping tears, helping with algebra at midnight, and sitting in freezing ice rinks for hockey practice. I had built trust brick by brick. Tiffany thought she could buy it with a shopping trip and a hashtag. Kayla looked directly at the security camera, knowing I was watching. She didn't look scared, she looked tired. She rolled her eyes and mouthed the word fake. I typed a quick text to her. "Hold the line, baby, almost there." Jason walked back into the frame, frustrated that he couldn't breach my office. The landlord called. He shouted at Kayla as if it were her fault. Said the rent check bounced. "Tell your mother to stop playing games." Kayla just turned up the volume on her headphones. She knew what. Jason didn't. There was no landlord. I owned the house outright. The rent was just another transfer I had stopped. The eviction wasn't coming from a stranger, it was coming from me. The next morning, Eric met me in the hospital cafeteria. He didn't look like a man whose wife was cheating on him. He looked like a surgeon preparing to cut. He placed a thick binder on the plastic table between us. I opened it. It was the financial autopsy of Jason's life. Eric adjusted his glasses. "The hemorrhage is worse than we thought," he said calmly. "It turns out Jason wasn't just spending your money, he was borrowing against a future he doesn't have." I flipped through the pages. The numbers were staggering. $24,000 in online gambling debt. Another $15,000 in credit card charges for consulting services that were clearly thinly veiled escorts charges that predated Tiffany by 2 years. But the most pathetic part was the furniture. In the last 48 hours since serving me the papers, Jason had charged $12,000 to a joint credit card for a leather sectional and a marble coffee table. He was furnishing my house for his new life on my credit. He believes he's won, Eric noted, tapping the page. The sunk cost fallacy in real time. He's spending money he assumes will keep flowing because it always has. I stared at the charge for the sofa. He thinks the house is his. He thinks the money is his. He thinks I'm going to just disappear. "We could freeze this card now," Eric suggested. "Stop the bleeding." "No," I said, closing the binder. "Let it go through. Let him buy the sofa. Let him buy the table. Let him fill the house with things he can't afford." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because when the eviction notice hits, he won't just lose the house," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "He LL be stuck with $12,000 of furniture he has no place to put. He's digging a hole." "Eric, I want him to dig it so deep he can't climb out." We sat in silence for a moment. Two betrayed spouses plotting the ruin of the people we once loved. It wasn't sad, it was clarifying. Jason's arrogance was his only asset, and he was leveraging it into bankruptcy. He was banking on my silence, my passivity. He was betting everything on the idea that I was too weak to fight back. He had no idea that while he was buying sofas, I was buying his debt. 3 days before my discharge, Eric called me. His voice was different this time. Sharper, faster. Mandy, check your secure email. Now I pulled up the document on my tablet. It was the lease. Renewal for the luxury sedan, the black Audi Jason loved more than he loved our daughter. The lease was under my shell company, Virtuoso Holdings, but Jason was the primary driver. The renewal date was 3 months ago. Look at the signature line, Eric said. I zoomed in. There at the bottom of the page was my name, Amanda Vance, but the A was looped too wide. The V was sharp, jagged. It wasn't my handwriting. It was a crude, shaky imitation. He forged it, I whispered. He didn't just forge it, Eric corrected. He notarized it. Look at the stamp. I looked. The notary stamp belonged to a friend of his from the golf club. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a marital dispute anymore. This wasn't just financial infidelity. This was a felony. Jason had committed fraud to keep driving a car he couldn't afford to maintain an image that wasn't real. This changes the venue, I said, my heart rate steadying into a rhythmic thud. We're not going to family court. No, Eric agreed. This is criminal. If you report the car is stolen property. And Jason is looking at 3 to 5 years. I stared at the fake signature. It was so sloppy, so arrogant. He must have signed it right there at his desk, laughing to himself, thinking I would never check, thinking I was too stupid to understand lease agreements. He thought I was a prop in his life, something to be used and forged. Don't file the police report yet, I said. Wait, Eric cautioned. If he crashes that car, I have a better idea, I interrupted. I opened the app for the car's GPS and remote management system. Virtuoso Holdings had full administrative control. He's driving to his parents' house for dinner on Friday, right, to introduce Tiffany as the new Mrs. Vance. That's the plan. Perfect, I said. Prepare the kill switch protocol. I want the car to die exactly when his ego does. Friday night dinner at my in-laws' house was a sacred tradition. Roast beef, stiff conversation, and the pretense of a perfect family. Jason had chosen this stage to debut his new life. He sat at the head of the table, Tiffany to his right, radiating the smug glow of a woman who thought she had secured the bag. They didn't expect me. When I walked into the dining room, the silence was absolute. I wasn't using my walker. I was standing straight, wearing a tailored black suit that cost more than Jason's car. What are you doing here? Jason stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. Mom, tell her to leave. Tiffany is family now. My mother-in-law looked between us, her face pale. Steve didn't speak, she knew better. I'm just here to deliver the mail, Jason, I said. My voice was low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. I placed 2 documents on the polished mahogany table. Item 1, I said, tapping the first paper, the eviction notice. You have 48 hours to vacate the property. Since I am the sole owner of the LLC that holds the deed and you have ceased contributing to the household expenses, your tenure is terminated. Jason laughed a nervous cracking sound. You don't own that house. We rented it. I rented it too. I corrected from myself. Item 2. I continued sliding the second document forward. It was my tax return from last year. The adjusted gross income line was highlighted in yellow. $850,000. Jason stared at the number. Tiffany leaned in her eyes, widening as she counted the zeros. You write children's books, Jason stammered, the color draining from his face. I write memoirs for billionaires, Jason, I said. I was the primary breadwinner for 16 years. The lifestyle you thought. You earned the suits, the trips, the car, I bought them. I subsidized your ego because I loved you, but love is a contract and you breached it. Tiffany pulled her hand away from Jason's arm as if he were radioactive. She did the math instantly. Jason wasn't rich. He was a man with massive debt and an angry ex-wife who controlled the purse strings. Come on, Kayla, Tiffany said, her voice shrill. Let's go wait in the car. She reached for my daughter, Kayla. Stood up, she looked at Tiffany, then at Jason, and finally walked over to stand beside me. You're not my mom, Kayla said, her voice dripping with teenage disdain, and he's not a victim, he's just a liar. Jason looked around the room. His parents looked ashamed, his girlfriend looked disgusted, his daughter looked indifferent, his narrative was collapsing. I'm leaving, Jason announced, grabbing his keys. I'm taking the Audi. No, I said softly. You're not, he stormed out the front door. We heard the heavy thud of the car door closing. Then silence, the engine didn't turn over, then the sound of Jason's screaming in frustration. I walked to the window, the others following. Jason was pounding on the steering wheel. I held up my phone. On the screen, the Virtuoso Holdings Fleet Management app displayed a red icon immobilized. I activated the remote kill switch 4 minutes ago, I told the room. And since the lease agreement was forged, I also flagged the vehicle as stolen. Blue and red lights flashed against the living room walls. The police cruiser pulled into the driveway, blocking Jason in. He froze his hands, gripping the useless steering wheel. That's the thing about ghost riders, Jason, I whispered to the glass. We know how to write an ending. The fallout was swift and clinical. Jason was arrested in his parents' driveway for forgery and grand theft auto. Because the lease value exceeded a certain amount, it was a felony charge. He didn't have bail money, and his parents, finally seeing the reality of his financial ruin, refused to put up their home as collateral. Tiffany didn't even wait for the arraignment. Once she realized there was no money, no house, and no status attached to Jason, she vanished. The parasocial substitute crumbled the moment the audience disappeared. Last I heard, she was back with her parents trying to rebrand herself as a lifestyle coach on social media. I sold the house. I couldn't live in a place stained by Jason's mediocrity. I moved Kayla and myself into a penthouse downtown, modern, open, and fully accessible. It has a dedicated writing studio with Florida-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This morning I sat down at my desk. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't opening a file named after a tech mogul or a politician. I opened a blank document. I typed my name at the top, Amanda Vance. Not a ghost, not a silent partner, not a victim. I looked at the blinking cursor. I had spent years editing other people's lives to make them sound heroic. Now I realized I didn't need to edit mine, I just needed to own it. I started typing. The first time I realized my husband was a bad investment I didn't sell, I doubled down. It was going to be a bestseller. And this time I was keeping every cent of the royalties. Amanda played the long game and won. But I have to ask, would you have the patience to wait that long for revenge, or would you have exploded immediately? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, hit like and subscribe for more story. Share this story. You are not alone. God bless you. Thanks for watching.